All right, thank you. Muted. The recording has started.
الله الكبير. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. الله الكبير. Again, we are indebted to our Creator, who is the all-gracious, the all-merciful, and He has bestowed this blessing upon us today, and we are eternally grateful for this blessing and for this favor that He's bestowed upon us. And again, these are not by accident. This is not because we are more intelligent than other people. Has nothing to do with the level of education that we have. This is coming from God, and He is the one who has brought us this gift today. And so the more grateful we are to God, the more successful we are in this world and especially in the hereafter. And again, gratefulness and gratitude is a God-like quality. And God is always appreciative. And so we have to reciprocate this and make sure that we are grateful to our Creator for all of the stuff that He has bestowed. Everything that we have is coming from God. This is not something we're generating. This is coming from God, and so we have to be cognizant of that fact and be eternally grateful to our Creator. What I wanted to discuss with you today is again I wanted this topic of prejudice. How bad prejudice is. Prejudice is something that makes people blind, and they can't see. God will not teach them. If somebody is prejudiced, that person is not a category of people that God will teach that person new things, and that person is going to be in ignorance and lack of knowledge for eternity. And so here I wanted to go to chapter 21, which is called the prophets. God says that they will never worry about the great dread. This is the day of judgment, and these are the believers. And they meet the angels who tell them, this is your day that was promised to you. And then the verse after that, God is talking about cosmology here. He says, the day we fold the sky like the folding of letters, just like the first creation, we repeat it. This is our promise. Indeed, we will surely do it all. Again, we want to go to a cosmology book to read about this. We don't want to hear this. Okay? This is how people are trained. This is how our thoughts go. Okay, so when we open this up, this verse becomes completely irrelevant and completely immaterial to us. It becomes because we already made up our mind. We already made up our mind that the knowledge is not coming from this book. We have to seek that knowledge from someplace else. Okay? So then the next one, it says, 105. I want to stress on this. And indeed, we wrote in the Psalms, as well as subsequent reminders, that the earth shall be inherited by my righteous servants. Okay. We're not going to delve into this because we're already prejudiced, because we have this thing in our mind that the Old Testament and the New Testament is full of mistakes. We're not going to even care about it. And so what God is saying here, it's just some nonsense that He's saying. Okay. Or he was referring to the original ones that do not exist anymore, because we don't like to delve into a book which is followed by the Judeans or the Nazarenes. We don't like that because we don't like them. That is prejudice. Okay. So we cannot learn anymore because God will not teach us. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to go to Psalm 37:11. But the meek shall inherit the earth and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. We will never learn about this because we already made up our mind. We already made up our mind. So we're basically telling God that He was lying to us. That's what we are saying. Okay, so God says in the Psalms, so you go to the Psalms and you find it. Now, let me also warn about this, that this was not available 100 years ago so easily. Now it's essentially at your fingertips. Or you can actually ask Google or whatever of these communicative things that you have, Amazon, Echo, whatever it is, you can ask them and say, please tell me 37:11, or tell me about the meek who shall inherit the earth. They will recite it to you. You don't even have to get up. You don't even have to type something. Okay? It's there. So the responsibility of the prejudiced person today is much more grave than the guy who lived 100 years ago. Okay? The first thing that comes to mind of a prejudiced person, that those books are outdated, I'm not going to listen to them. I don't care when God says that the believers believe in those scriptures. We just read it in 2:136, and we're going to read it again in chapter 2. Okay? Because that person already made up his or her mind. That person is completely blind to these things. Okay? I want to go up here, and I want to go to Matthew 5:5. There it is, Matthew 5:5. Now this is the so-called Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Okay. Now we go back to the Quran, and this is the truth that comes from God. It says, and indeed He wrote in the Psalms, as well as subsequent reminders, that the earth shall be inherited by my righteous servants. Okay, so we've already made up our mind that those books are full of mistakes. Then we even forget what's in the Quran. We don't even remember what's in the Quran. We forget. Because we already read, we already made up our mind that all the stuff that's in there are garbage. In spite of the fact that God tells us otherwise. Okay? This is what will happen to somebody who's already made it. That's why I keep saying that when you open up the Quran, you have to open it up with no prejudice in your heart. If you have prejudice in your heart, the Quran becomes completely opaque. You can't see it. You read these verses, but you think these are fables. As I said, when you read this one, verse 104, you do not expect cosmology to come from Quran. You don't like medicine to come from the Quran. You always think there's some kind of trick or fable. Okay? You think that this is God was saying just you know, these are allegorical stuff, and he says that he doesn't really mean it. Okay? So we just should read it because it has some degree of piety. Okay? That's how people think of the Quran. They do not think of it as a book that gives information to people that they can use later. Okay? Verse 104, folding of letters. It's called the Big Crunch in cosmology. Okay, recently found. Somebody goes read that and then they ask me about Big Crunch. Well, it's in the Quran, it's already told you that. Okay, but the point is we don't believe in that. We don't believe in God says that, we don't believe it. So So we have to examine ourselves. This is what I always say. Has to be a self-diagnosis on our part. Do we really believe in these things, or we just do this because it has, in Iran they say sabab dare. That means it adds some degree of piety for me. That's what it is. It's not a book of information. It never told you how to read, how to make steel, so I have to go and buy it from the Swedes. Okay? But it tells you how to make steel. You just refuse to learn it because you were busy doing some kind of nonsense. Okay? That's the problem we have. And every group has the same problem because they never take it seriously. Some idols are okay for them, some idols are not okay for them because they are prejudiced against a group of people. Okay. So when we see these things, as I said, then we have to be an honest broker. That means that we have to agree that God is never unjust towards us. It's us who are committing injustice against our own souls. Okay? So I go on, it says, indeed, in this there is a message for the people who are worshippers. That means God's true worshippers are going to take heed from these verses that we just read and found the references in the Old Testament, Psalms, the book of Psalms, and also in the book of Matthew. Okay, so we actually sort of, let's say, checked on God because we were already prejudiced that this is nothing. Okay, we shouldn't take it seriously here. Okay. Indeed, in this there is a message for the people who are worshippers. And we only send you as a mercy to the whole world. And when the messenger comes, it's a mercy from God. It's not a burden upon them. Some people never hear from the messenger because they probably don't need the messenger. They have the information already. They know who God is. They know God doesn't waste. They know that. Okay. So if we are born like this, okay, then we are one of those worshippers. Otherwise, we are not a worshipper. So this only be written. This message is a message in there for those people who are worshippers. Otherwise, we are prejudiced. We are not worshippers. We are null and void. Everything that we do is null and void. Doesn't matter how much we do it. Okay, because in our hearts we are prejudiced. God will never teach somebody who's prejudiced. They are going to be in complete darkness. In complete darkness. They never see the light. So this knowledge comes to those people who take this seriously and believe that God is the truth. So as I said, again, these are self-diagnostics that we have to run upon our own souls and see where we stand today. Okay? As I said, are we even-handed? Okay? Do we believe that our disbelievers are better than these disbelievers? Have they been absolved by the scripture just because they look like us? Or they speak the same language or dialect that we do? I mean, do you think that God judges people like that? So that's what we have to do. We have to run these things, these self-diagnostics, and we have to be the judge. Okay? Otherwise, on day of judgment, when God says that your skin will testify against you, they said you thought that you were going to hide from your own skin. is a prejudiced heart, is going to speak against you. Yes, I was there, and this guy he had all these evil thoughts. Okay? And that's why he never learned anything. Okay, he was in complete darkness all his life. And what do you think happened in the day of judgment? Well, that person is put well, not like those people who never worry about it. That the dreaded day. Okay. So all of these has to be taken, okay, seriously, taken as it is. God is not saying something because he doesn't have any words to say, or he wants to hear himself talking. So we have to pay attention, as I said, and again, we have to open up the Quran with no prejudice in our heart, otherwise it becomes completely opaque. We can't see anything. We can't see past our noses. Okay, I'm going to stop here and we'll finish this rakah. Allahu Kabir. سبحان ربي العظيم الله كبير الله كبير سبحان ربي الأعلى الله كبير الله كبير الله كبير بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الله كبير In the second rakah, what I wanted to discuss is this is the generators for initials in Surah 9. Okay, and so we want to see how these initials are actually connected to chapter 9, having 127 verses. So I'm repeating this from previous thing because what we found out today is going to be connected to this. So I had to repeat this. So refresh people's memories so we know where we are in the flow of things. Okay. So these are the so-called Gaussian composites. And so 2,5 is a Gaussian composite. That means that it can actually factor out in the complex domain. Okay, complex number is an imaginary number plus a real number. So if you're in engineering and computer science, you understand this. But anyway, so 2, 5, 19th one is 173, and 47th one is 521, is a Gaussian composite. And then when we get to 209, it's actually the 422nd prime, and it happens to be 2917. So now we'll see how this is actually connected to initials in the Quran. 209 is actually the total frequency of Ain plus Sin plus Qaf in Surah 42. Remember, Surah 42 has two sets of initials, Hamim, Ain, Sin, Qaf. So note that Ain, Sin, Qaf is actually 42 too. Okay? And I showed this in my talks. This is only Hafs version of the Quran. The other versions bundle this up in the first verse, which is 42:1. That is wrong. Those Qurans are wrong. They're not correct. Hafs version is correct. Okay, can you imagine this? This is after 1400 years. A mathematical construct actually comes and tells you which one is correct. This has never happened in the history of mankind. Okay? A mathematical construct based on prime and indices comes after 1400 years and tells you which version is correct. Okay? So now look at this. 2917. Remember now, this 2917 has exactly those 9127 digits in there. You see, 9217. Okay. So anyway, 2917 happens to be the 11th permutation of 1279, and the 90th permutation happens to be of 1279 happens to be 9127. And Surah 9 has 127 verses, but also 209, which is number of Ain Sin Qaf, actually is 11 times 19. So either 209 gives you information where the indices of these 2917 and 9127 happen to be in the domain of permutation group property, or the other way around. They're forcing each other to be in those positions. Can you imagine that? Okay. Far away. 422 lonely Gaussian prime happens to be 102.23, and it happens to be 1254 regular prime. 1254 happens to be the frequency of Alif Lam Mim in chapter 30, Surah 30 Noah. Okay. 102.23 happens to be the concatenation of 102 and 23. And we know that 23rd tri-prime actually happens to be 102, which is 2 times 3 times 17. And the indices of these primes, 23, 2, 3, and 17s are again 9127, reaffirming that Surah 9 has 127 verses. Okay. This also tells us 42.2 is the correct verse number for Ain Sin Qaf. Thereby, only Hafs version of the Quran is correct. Okay. Now again, I tabulated here so everybody can see it. Okay. 102, 23, 102 is 2 times 3, and then I said this index of 23 is 9. Index of 230 is 127. Okay. Now, this is what we found out. Okay. God's mercy again tells us about this. It says that 422 is the index of lonely prime 5059. Okay? So this lonely prime 50, it's also index of a lot of other things too. Okay? But in this case, it's 5059. And one thing that you notice very quickly about this 5059, that the number of digits actually adds up to 19. 5 plus 5 is 10 plus 9 is 19. And 5059 happens to be the index of tri-prime 19798. Note that the frequency of Qaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sad in Surah is 798 in chapter 19. Okay? So that number actually tells us that. Okay, 422, which generated all of these things for us. Generated 202, 209, number of Ain Sin Qaf, the position of Ain Sin Qaf in the Quran. Okay? Now he tells us that Surah 19 is supposed to have 798. Qaf plus Ha plus Ya plus Ain plus Sa. Okay? This is truly God's mercy and generosity that is bestowed upon us. And again, so when we read those things, we see the connectivity between these things. And again, I go back to the first surah, the first khutbah. And we have to understand that when God says something, it is the truth. It cannot be taken with prejudice in our hearts. If we do that, we basically are calling God a liar. And again, as I said, the information today is so easily available and so abundant, okay, that we cannot shirk off the responsibility to say, yeah, we didn't know. This is very different from 100 years ago, which the number of libraries is very small. Books were not translated properly. Okay. By the way, what I read over there was King James version of the Old Testament. It doesn't make any difference. It still gives you the thing. Okay. And if you look at the word meek, okay, look at the meaning of meek. Meek means somebody who's submissive, a Muslim. Okay? And again, we don't have any excuses for these things. Excuses are over. Okay? We have to end up the prejudice in our hearts. If we don't do that, we are going to be in big trouble. So, take these things, and as I said, these are the stuff that is telling us, as I said, is telling us after 1400 years that which version is correct. Okay? That should really shake us up to the foundation. We cannot take these just, and then, have a discussion with somebody and in our hearts and our mind that their book is full of mistakes and everything, and all I have to prove is that their book is full of mistakes. And if I do that, then I win this debate. And if I win the debate, then I feed my own ego. That is not the point. That is not the point of worshiping God alone. It has nothing to do with it. That person is worshiping his own ego. That wants to prove superiority over somebody else. So again, on Day of Judgment, we'll be faced with these things, with these proofs again. And we're going to be asked, didn't somebody show you these things? Okay. And at that time, we have to say, yes, they did, but we didn't pay any attention. We're too prejudiced to pay any attention. Because we already made up our mind that those books are full of mistakes. Ours were okay. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and we'll finish our Juma. Allahu Kabir. سبحان ربي العظيم الله الكبير الله الكبير سبحان ربي الأعلى الله الكبير الله الكبير سبحان ربي الأعلى الله الكبير أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله الله الكبير بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الله الكبير سبحان ربي العظيم الله الكبير الله الكبير سبحان ربي الأعلى الله الكبير الله الكبير سبحان ربي الأعلى الله الكبير بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الله الكبير سبحان ربي العظيم الله الكبير الله الكبير سبحان ربي الأعلى الله الكبير الله الكبير الله الكبير أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله السلام عليكم السلام عليكم. Okay, hello everyone.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you so much.